Speaking of the most powerful years in the country, there was a big boost to the economy today. The finance minister announced a slashed corporate tax for domestic companies. Now, from paying a tax of what used to be 30% up to 35%, companies will pay 22 to 25%. In fact, the bigger boost will be for new manufacturing domestic companies. That was announced today. Newly set up companies that are set up to manufacture and registered after the 1st of October will only pay tax of 15% plus cess, which will take them up to about 17%. Now, that's practically cutting that tax burden in half. This move is being viewed as a big bang reform, and it's being looked at as something that was much needed to boost the economy. The stock market, for example, reacted today with the biggest rally of the decade. Improved consumer sentiment, creating jobs and boosting demand, which is what the government is aiming for. We're going to try and figure out if today's move will result in these three things. Take a look.
To slash the corporate tax rates for domestic companies and also for new domestic manufacturing companies. A new provision has been inserted in the Income Tax Act with effect from fiscal year 2019-20, which allows any domestic company an option to pay income tax at the rate of 22%. The effective tax rate for these companies shall be 25.17%, inclusive of all surcharges and cess. Such companies shall not be required to pay any minimum alternative tax, no MAT on them. In order to provide relief to listed companies which have already made a public announcement of buyback before 5th July 2019, it is provided that tax on buyback of shares, it is provided that tax on buyback of shares in case of such companies shall not be charged.
Well, the GST Council also met today, and that meeting, from what we understand, has just concluded. And here are some of the big announcements so far. The press briefing is underway, but from what we're learning, hotel stays will get cheaper ahead of the wedding season. This will be important. GST on outdoor catering has been reduced to 5%. Caffeinated beverages will get expensive with GST hiked from 18 to 28%. GST has been reduced on zips, marine fuel, wet grinders, which are those large grinders that are used to make idli, so some people in the south will be happy, and cut from polished semi-stones, cut and polished semi-stones, I beg your pardon. There will also be no GST on dried tamarind. Going into this meet, of course, automakers or auto companies were hoping for a GST rate cut, but they've been compensated by that massive corporate tax cut that they have received. We'll bring you more updates as and when we get them. We'll also take a look at the, let's just listen to the finance minister in that briefing as well.
If I were to look at the broader issues, we've spoken up on the issues related to rates which came through the fitment committees. We've spoken about larger simplification of rates. We've spoken about the GOMs on which there's a call taken that with a time-bound manner they should quickly meet and resolve the issues which have been posed to them. And very clearly on the issues where the committee has to talk about implementation for the convenience of the newer forms and things like that, a call has been taken in favor of greater simplification, clarity, and also if that has been a reason for people to delay compliance, we should take them on board and respond to them. So if this is the broader framework with which what we have spoken about in the councils today, on the GST rate reductions, I'm listing it out in some random order. There's no particular order in which we are talking. slide fasteners, the zips as they say, have been reduced from 18 to 12%. Marine fuel, 18 to 5%. 0.5% FO is added there. Then 12 to 5% on wet grinders consisting of stone as a grinder. 5% to nil on dried tamarind, plates and cups made of leaves, flowers, barks and so on, disposable and bio-friendly. 3% to 0.25% on cut and polished semi-precious stones. Cut and polished semi-precious stones. Applicable rate to 5% on specified goods of petroleum operations undertaken under the hydrocarbon exploration licensing policy, the HELP, hydrocarbon exploration licensing policy. There, the applicable rate has been brought to 5% on specified goods for petroleum operations.
All right, let's go straight to our guest to find out if this is the silver bullet or the solution that India needed. Abhishek Rastogi's tax partner at Khaitan and Company joins us along with Gurmeet Chadha, who is the co-founder and CEO of Complete Circle Consultants. We also have Gopal Agarwal of the BJP, Mr. Anjan Roy, who is a senior economist, and Vinkesh Ulati, who is the vice president of the Federation of Automobile Dealers Association, and Professor Kumar, who is the chair professor at the Institute of Social Sciences. Professor Kumar, if I may, I'd like to come to you first. We've had several conversations almost consecutively over the last couple of weeks about the solutions that the government needs to explore. Do you believe that this massive, massive cut in corporate tax is what the economy needed?
So, we have to see when there's a problem, which is that the rate of growth of the economy is constantly sliding, then what is the solution for it? We have to understand the cause of that. And the cause of the slide has been the demand problem, which has originated in the unorganized sector, where employment is going down and where the incomes have gone down. Now, was profit the real cause why there was a slowdown in the economy? If the profit was the cause, that there was a less of profit and that was the cause, then increasing profits would help. But my argument is that that was not the cause why the economy was slowing down. The economy was slowing down, their sales were falling, and that's why the profits were declining, So it's the other way around. If you increase profits by cutting taxes, that does not necessarily increase demand. And because demand doesn't go up, capacity utilization doesn't go up. And when capacity utilization doesn't go up, then investment doesn't go up. And the idea of a tax cut on the corporates would be to boost investment. Now, it might happen over several years later that, the current profits may lead to increased investment, but it's very unlikely that it will lead to any increase in investment in the coming period. Even the provision that, new companies which start in October and, they will get a lower tax rate, even that is not going to happen unless demand increases. Similarly, the concessions to foreign investment is not going to yield anything unless the demand increases in the economy. So we needed to worry about the demand increase in the economy. And when we already have a fiscal deficit problem because of the shortfall in tax collection, the direct tax collection is low, GST collection is low, the increase in the fiscal deficit that's going to take place will be quite phenomenal, because we are 1.45 lakh crore is being given up, and earlier we had announced 70,000 crores for the banks and so on. So the fiscal deficit instead of 3.3% was already rising, So in this situation, we need to have a political decision. How much should the fiscal deficit be? Because it's already 9% or more, given that the states have a fiscal deficit, the public sector has it, and the central government has the fiscal deficit. So yes, my argument is that this is not the solution to the problem of shortage of demand. These are supply side responses, and supply side responses will take a long time for them to act.
All right. I also want to bring the same question to Mr. Anjan Roy, who's a senior economist as well. I saw you nodding, but the question is, and I've been told, with 1.45 lakh crore rupees now effectively left on the table for companies to spend, won't this eventually wind up in the economy and solve the liquidity problem? So basically, these companies now have more money in their balance sheets, which will allow them to make profits, which will allow them then to pass on those profits as investments or as discounts to consumers.
Tax cuts are always welcome. There is no doubt about it. The less money in the hands of the governments, the better. I think the money that will accrue to the companies as a result of this will be wisely spent. They might be spent in investment, or they might be spent in dividends, whatever. But I agree with Professor Kumar, Kumar that the effect of such steps will be in the long run. Right now we are passing through a slowdown, and for meeting a slowdown we should have tried more short-term remedies. Maybe short-term remedies are no good, long-term remedies are better, but we should have tried some short-term remedies of giving money in the hands of the people, I mean lower down. The concessions that have been given will give money at the top level, and there the propensity to consume is much less. They will not immediately spend the money. But, for example, what Piyush Goyal has done, he has announced that railways will be giving productivity bonus to its employees. That money will immediately be spent in the festival season, and that will buck up the demand. So this kind of, particularly a creation of demand in the rural sector, farm areas, that would be very important. I'm sure the government would look into this and come out with a big bang announcement one of these days.
Very well said. I just want to, ask the panel if there's anyone else who wants to come in on whether they believe that this is the solution. I can see Abhishek Rastogi shaking his head. Mr. Rastogi, what sort of money will this leave on the table for corporate India? Will they be able to give, for example, because it's only 1st April onwards, the tax will only be applicable on the 1st of April. Does this mean every corporate will be able to plan better, maybe hand out Diwali bonuses that people can go out and spend or invest, or maybe stop at least the bleeding in terms of jobs right now?
I think the government has a twin role to play here. They, of course, have to maintain the fiscal discipline and at the same time has to encourage the MSME sector in particular. So what has happened by way of this corporate tax reduction is that a lot of this incentive would go to these companies or the startups for them, to come back to the business and, be motivated to work in this sphere. Now, what has also happened is that there are a lot of tax reductions which have been announced about the hotel industry, the car sector, and so many other smaller supplies. Now, what happens is that at the end of the year, the government needs tax correction as well. So I think the focus, that's why, the FM very clearly mentioned, is on the simplification and improved compliances, which means that the intent of the government is very clear that, they would want to avoid the tax leakages, plug those loopholes where the tax leakage happens, improve the performance in terms of compliances so that the collection increases. And mind you, we should not forget that the government a couple of months back announced the amnesty scheme, which means that all of these past taxes which are today in the litigation or pending in courts would give a lot of revenue. The date which has now been implemented is 1st of October until 31st of December, which means that a lot of this pending litigation wherein the taxpayers were, not very sure whether to pay or not, they have been given huge incentive to pay this tax at a lower rate by giving this benefit up to 70%, 75%, 50% in various cases with a complete waiver of interest and penalty. So which means that if we have to look the collection and the holistic picture, both the direct taxes, the indirect taxes, and the amount of taxes which will be collected from this amnesty scheme becomes very relevant, because the government has ambitious plans when it comes to the infrastructure development. So I think the government again has a twin role to play, so that the balance is maintained between the tax applicability. The tax is reduced on certain essential commodities which could boost up the demand. And of course, there has been an announcement even in the past that these tax rate rationalization will happen in such a way so that the employment generates and the demand generates. So I think a couple of these key factors,
I'm also going to ask,
forgive me
for interrupting you. One second. I'm also going to ask my panelists to please keep your answers as short as possible, because this is not a business channel, hence it becomes a little technical for the audience to understand. All we want to know, and I'll boil this down, all we want to know is, will we stop losing our jobs? Will we get a Diwali bonus? Will the mood of the market improve right now? Because all of the management have been telling people that, listen, the going is bad, don't expect bonuses this year, don't expect raises this year, people are losing their jobs. I want to know if this move will change that. That's a simple, we'll just boil it down to that simple question. Will this announcement change that? Mr. We have Vinkesh Gulati of the Automobile Dealers Association with us, and we have Gurmeet Chadha as well. Gurmeet Chadha wanted to say something. Mr. Chadha, go ahead, and I'll go back to Mr. Gulati. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think there's a clear linkage with employment. And you see, and I'll give you a US example, that when US cut rates, while the corporate tax rates came down, the overall federal tax collections went up because the individual taxes went up. There were more employment, people worked for more number of hours, and actually their incomes went up. So higher cash flow on the balance sheet gets channelized towards debt reduction. It gets channelized towards the investment cycle. It will get channelized towards the price reduction. So it has a very positive, and we have to look at the interlinkage. We don't have to necessarily look at it holistic only from the point of view, the corporate making taxes. Also, this reform has to be looked at in continuation of what the government said when they said that they want DTC to be implemented, which is direct tax code. The first, by removing corporate tax, and cutting corporate tax, they have cleared the deck for the DTC implementation, because this was one key, ingredient of DTC, of corporate taxes being cut. Now you suddenly have, we are an economy which is per capita $2,000. Our financial savings are not enough to, drive investments. So we just need to go a far way. So we need foreign capital. With these new manufacturing facilities, coming at 15%, it will attract more capital, more employment.
So let me also then bring in Gopal Agarwal of the BJP. Mr. Agarwal, I want you to please address what Professor Kumar raised in the beginning of the show. He basically said, and he has been saying now for several weeks, that the problem is with the unorganized sector. And we'll also bring you stories of flower vendors, fruit vendors, people who are, in that very, very unorganized sort of part of the economy, who are struggling at this point. Now, Professor Kumar's argument was that this is, again, this is a solution for the absolutely organized sector, for corporate India. It will not result in an increase of demand. Of course, the fiscal deficit is a gamble the government had to take. So is there a response for Professor Kumar?
I would like to tell you one thing, Faye. The issue is that when you ask whether this measure is for tackling the demand problem of the economy, no, we are never claiming it that it will tackle the demand problem. It is for investment. There are several factors which affect the economy. There is a factor of supply of credit that we have tackled. There was an issue of investment, that private investment, capital formation, that we had to tackle. This measure of reduction in corporate tax is for supporting this investment demand from the private company. And in the first factor is that manufacturing will help in employment generation. Those employment was an important problem in the economy. So employment generation, creation of investment are the two basic important factors that this announcement is trying to tackle. It is not trying to tackle the consumption. So if you link it with the consumption, that's a false logic that you want to build. Second important thing I want to say is that there is a trade conflict between US and China, and lot of manufacturing is going to shift from China to other countries, and we have to create a level playing field for that investment of manufacturing sector to come to India.
Okay.
This is creating a competitive and beneficiary environment for supporting the manufacturing in India, bringing manufacturing facilities from other countries to India. These are the three objectives that this will tackle, and you analyze this initiative in regard to that. If you are talking of consumption, I will give you several other factors that we are trying to do with them. There are other factors that you will further see. This is not the end of the road. You will see many more announcements. Every week you are seeing an announcement.
Can we afford them, Mr. Agarwal?
You don't take into in isolation. Yesterday also there was an announcement of Loan Mela, NBFC, providing credit to NBFC. That are the issues which will tackle the consumption also. There are issues with the infrastructure investment that the government plans of 100 lakh crore, which will create liquidity into the system. Then rural economy, we are going to give boost to that. So it's a 360 degrees that the economy work.
Okay, Mr. Gulati is with us as well, and he represents the Automobile Dealers Association. Mr. Gulati, the auto industry was asking for a cut in GST. They have instead been given a massive corporate tax cut. Does this do the trick? Are you happy?
No, Faye, actually, we were looking at a short-term thing, because see, already it's been a year when the retails are down, and the retails are down in a very high numbers. So obviously, with the FM giving the corporate tax, obviously it will benefit, but it's a long-run game. If the sales are down and the overall profit is down, so saving in some tax will give a bit of benefit, but when? When the balance sheet is cleared in a year or so later. What we need today is a market sentiment to go up. Obviously, with the share market going up because of this announcement, there will be some good sentiment in the market. And if it continues, it will help us a bit. But that bit is not what we were expecting today. A small cut in GST would have given us a bigger boost in the market and the customers' sentiment going up. But okay, a good big day for us, but couldn't get the GST cut. Okay, whatever corporate tax cut we could get, let's hope it creates a spurge in the market.
All right. So I just want to bring in rebuttals at this point, and also there is the concern of fiscal deficit. But is the fiscal deficit something that should worry us as ordinary Indians? Mr. Agarwal, the measures that the government is putting out, can we afford it as a country right now? Can we take that hit and spend that kind of money?
So the issue is that fiscal deficit is one of the important concern that everybody is talking about. But you have to see that there will be tax buoyancy from the growth. Ultimately, how we are planning to the economic growth is that we want to expand the size of the growth GDP. In that increase in the size of the GDP, we think that there will be more tax buoyancy, and our compliance level also shows that as you reduce the tax level, there is a better compliance, because you have seen that government is taking very strong measures on tax avoidance. There is a move toward digital economy. There is a move toward e-assessment. There is a move toward GST, where all things are online without any subjective intervention, physical intervention. There is government is trying to establish the audit trail. All this will help into better tax compliance, and through that we want to increase tax buoyancy. And size of economy also, we are planning to almost make it to $5 trillion. So these are the issues through which we will tackle the fiscal deficit. Other thing there are several measures like the disinvestment. We have announced a big ticket reforms in the PSUs, where there will be IPOs, public offloading of government shareholding. Then there are plans for disinvesting some of the companies, and there are plans for some companies which are why our government has to go into those businesses. So there are several measures through which we can go for maintaining the fiscal deficit. And at present, I would like to just mention that the government is looking after economic growth, GDP growth, employment generation, and just macroeconomic parameters is not what government is chasing. Macroeconomic parameters are to support and help the economy. They are not that the economy has to look into only the macroeconomic parameter. So we are a dynamic decision making government, which we take decisions according to change situations also.
Well, to be fair, and I want to place this before the panel, if when you do say you're a dynamic decision-making government, that is true, because it was in the budget a few months ago that you decided to increase corporate tax, and now you have decided to decrease corporate tax. Doesn't that also suggest a little bit of difficulty in sort of, I mean, at the end of the day, you are a government of a very large, very complex country. Should we be sort of ping-ponging decision-making in this manner?
No, this is not a ping-pong decision. Our target is $5 trillion economy. Our target is around 8 to 9% of GDP growth rate. Our target is to contain inflation. Our target is to bring ease of living through infrastructure investment. These are the target we are chasing. For that, whatever correction, road correction or decision making are required. Tomorrow we'll come for, Mr. Kumar said that we want reforms in the informal sector, labor force, etc. Definitely we are going to come out with certain reforms, etc. in the labor
so I understand that. My only point was, there was some criticism that decisions that changed this quickly perhaps are not as well researched as they should be. But I see Mr. Chadda's hand go up. Mr. Chadda, go ahead. Mr. Chadda, go ahead.
You're right. I think, see, tax buoyancy will pick up with a lag. If you see the 97 cut of 5%, which Mr. Chidambaram did, after a year, the higher compliance and buoyancy made up for the fall. I think this fiscal stress could actually, to my mind, could be a blessing in disguise, because the government so far has been doing disinvestment through ETFs, which is technically not disinvestment. An ONGC buying a HPCL or a BPCL being bought by IOCs are not disinvestments. After 2003, in fact, there has been no strategic disinvestment. I think what this will do now is to force them to look at non-tax revenues, which could mean a strategic divestment of Air India, so of the loss-making names like BSNL and others. There are already talks of government being less than 51% in some of the PSUs. I mean, why should we be majority owners in 12, 13 banks? It doesn't make sense. So I think this, a crisis like this could actually force you to do strategic disinvestment, which could probably send a message that government business is not to be in business.
Well, that is interesting. Professor Kumar has his hand up. Professor Kumar, at the end of the day, even if, and if the government has not been able to divest up till now because the market was just not ready, but should we take the market's reaction, which has been amazing, the highest bump up in 10 years from the market, should we take that market's reaction as a thumbs up from corporate India?
That's absolutely right, because the profits are going to increase, and when profits increase, definitely the stock market will rise. But let's remember that there are only 4,000 companies in the stock market. We are talking about crores of units in the micro sector and 50,000 in the small and medium sector. What about them? The stock market doesn't quite represent them, and that's where the demand problem really is. And within the stock market also, bulk of the holding, I think 80% of the holding is with just 1% of the people of the country. So the stock market bumping up, the wealth effect that it might create will be affecting only 1% of the population. The demand shortage is coming from the balanced 99% or the 94% in the workforce of the unorganized sector. Where is their demand going to rise? Because if they demand more textile, if they demand more katoris, if they demand more shoes, then only the economy will begin to revive, then only will the demand in the economy revive. Now, Mr. Agarwal is right that the government is doing structural reform which might have a long-term effect over 2 or 3 years. But today the problem is that the economy is sliding from 5.8% to 5%, and this year, this quarter probably is going to be more like 4.5% because everything else is sliding. So with a sliding economy at 4.5%, how are we going to reach $5 trillion? That would require a 17 or 18% rate of growth in the last quarter, starting at this percent thing. So that's unlikely. And my argument would be that, investment has to be raised. The budget this year, because it was short of resources last year, has cut back capital expenditure from 9.2 lakh crores to 8.5 lakh crores, whereas to get an average of 20 lakh crores, we needed to rise to 15 to 16 lakh crores. So instead of rising to 15 to 16 lakh crore, we've been cutting back capital expenditure, and that's not the way to achieve 100 lakh crore of investment in the economy in 5 years, and that's not what is happening in the economy today. So I would say that the shortage of resources is showing up in the cutting of capital expenditure, and this year the shortage will be even greater because the tax buoyancy is low, the tax GDP ratio is falling, and this will impact the states also because the states get 40% of the tax collection. So if tax collection is low, the state's deficit will also rise, and therefore there'll be a further problem about the state's expenditure, and state's expenditure is very important for education, health, and for other such things. So in other words, there are a lot of complications that are there in the way the budget is being managed, and changing the budget 3 months down the line, and then the next budget will be in trouble because if we've given up so much resources now, how will the buoyancy assumption be there? And finally, disinvestment does not mean an increase in investment.
Yes.
It only means the private sector is investing, whereas the government will use that money to cover its fiscal deficit. So investment doesn't rise when the disinvestment takes place.
Okay.
So that's
Okay,
another
all right.
problem
Professor
with
Kumar, let
raising
me also
resources
take
through
a question.
disinvestment.
Let me take a question to Mr. Agarwal. I saw his hand go up. I see you, Mr. Roy. Mr. Agarwal, I want to ask you this. The money now that we give, that you are handing over, the 1.45 lakh crore rupees that has been given to corporate India as a gift for an early Diwali, now rests on the books, on the profit and loss of these companies, right? How do we know that they will use the money to invest and to reward their employees and not use the money to reward their shareholders by just giving larger bonuses or by handing money to their shareholders? Because there are two different stakeholders here. They may want to just reward their shareholders with the money. How do we know it's going to find its way into the economy?
One thing is that this terminology of revenue foregone, just meaning that this is a gift from the government to the corporate world, is not like that. If whatever taxation you are charging, that is a resource that the corporate sector gives to the government, and whatever tax rate the government decides, it's the charge from the corporate or anybody that the government takes. So there is nothing that the government is giving from its kitty to any corporate sector. Second thing is that once you talk of why those are entrepreneurs, why those are investors, because they want to leverage their money flow or their liquidity or their corpus to make more profits. That's the basic concept in capitalist and market economy that we believe. Why there is entrepreneurship? India is an entrepreneurship country. We have been developing over the last so much period because we believe in entrepreneurship, self-employment, development, manufacturing. Ultimately, if you do not think that the people will invest and just sit in their room and lie down and sleep and not do anything, so that's not we assume for our countrymen. So if they have money, they have an opportunity, they want to grow, they will definitely come for an investment. So we are creating an ecosystem where they have liquidity, and ultimately if profitability, their interest rate we are reducing, trying to transmit the rate reduction from the RBI to the the manufacturing
let me because forgive me, Mr. Agarwal, forgive me. I just want to take this around the panel, otherwise we'll run out of time.
Oh no, last 10 seconds, last 10 seconds.
Okay.
Last 10 seconds is that when you talk of the issues like decisions, etc., you have to think that the government is also taking various measures which will help the economy everywhere. And what is economic decision? It is managing your resources. If the resources are unlimited,
allow me to please give the others a chance to speak.
But ultimately, best allocation of resources.
Mr. Roy had his hand up, and I'm just going to ask everybody to answer one straightforward question. Will this help? Will this bring us closer to not losing our jobs, to having more money in the bank, to feeling slightly more comfortable as citizens? Mr. Roy.
See, any large tax cut will generate a feel-good factor. There is no doubt about it. But if you cut taxes and leave more with at the hands of the companies, it does not necessarily mean they will invest. People invest only when there is excess demand, when they have to have more capacity to meet that excess demand. So we have been growing on the back of a huge consumption expenditure within the country. Now, suddenly that consumption expenditure has gone down. We are all talking about how to improve consumption expenditure. I think there are some signs of consumption expenditure which should once again get back into its role, because I see that the prices are rising of farm products, which means that the reverse flow of income into the farm sector in the rural economy is once again starting. So I expect that with the coming harvest season, with the rising firming up of prices of vegetables, fruits, and other farm products, the farmer or the rural economy will get a leg up, and they will spend more from October onwards, and this will create a demand on its own.
Okay.
It will not be because you have given a tax cut, but it is on the dynamics of the rural situation or the dynamics of the markets.
All right. I also saw Mr. Rastogi put his hand up. Mr. Rastogi, go ahead. Do you believe that this is the sort of magic bullet that we needed?
See, So basically, see, what happens is, apart from motivating the entire business community, what happens is that the purchasing power gets increased, the investment power gets increased. Now, see, the businesses also are very closely monitoring the approach of the government. So what happens by these tax cuts is, of course, you raise the question that would it mean more employment? Would it mean more benefits to the employees? Definitely, there would be some positive impact onto that as well, because the money comes into circulation, the purchasing power gets increased, and the investment power gets increased. Now, which means that these existing companies, they would either invest more into more diverse businesses, or would try to motivate their employees, get into new contracts. So which means that this is basically a circle. And by doing this, the intent of the government looks very, very clear, that they want to boost the businesses, and that's why the stocks have, reflected in that passion.
Right. So I have Rakesh Kumar right now on the phone line. Rakesh Kumar, go ahead.
Good evening, madam.
Good evening.
In fact, what I want to say is that whenever this tax cut has taken place, and roughly that is the corporate sector will be benefited more than 1.5 lakh crore. That is just the transferring of the purchasing power from the government to the corporate. And it means the government is asking the private sector to drive the economy.
Yes.
And in other words, that the government will have to sit idle in the next capex cycle, that is the capital expenditure. This now you will see that in the last budget, the capital expenditure has reduced to 8,50,000 crores, taken public sector and the government taken together. Now, when the corporate, in fact, will see that demand is there, then only they will invest. But there is a demand slowdown, and demand slowdown is where? That is in the rural economy as well as in the unorganized sector.
Yes.
So instead of you have boosted the rural sector and MSME sector, you are giving more money in the hands of the corporate. And when the climate will not be good, that will be retained in the reserve and surpluses of the corporate, and their financial health will be strengthened. And the government is weakening its own hand, and it won't able to generate the employment.
That's a very nuanced point of view, Mr. Kumar. What do you do by profession?
Can be raised only by the government. It is not the corporate. They can raise only the salaried employment. The wage employment is to be grown by the government only. So therefore, the government should have paid the attention to it when they have cut the taxes.
Economics professor, I suspect. Mr. Kumar, what do you do by profession?
I am professor of economics, basically.
All right, it was a pleasure to hear your point of view, Professor Kumar. Also, Mr. Dharmendra on the phone line from Mumbai. Go ahead.
Good evening, Faye.
Good evening.
Faye, I have got a very insane suggestion here.
Okay. Go ahead.
There are two kind of expenditures that we do. One is investment-based expenditure. One is consumption-based expenditure.
Okay.
Now, what happens in investment-based expenditure? We have got housing, we have got automobiles, we have got insurance and policies, and these are once in a lifetime, like once in 10 years we do, right?
Yes.
Whereas the consumption-based expenditure is everyday expenditure.
Yes.
Now, we get benefit on the investment-based expenditure. Now, here is my suggestion to the government. Come out with some kind of a card, which is called as the consumer benefit rebate card. wherein you give the concession to the buyer or the person on the basis of the consumption. As such, the government has got my data on my through my PAN card. That what is my income. Now, if government can come out with some kind of a card where they can tap my expenditure, like 20% of my salary, if I'm doing the expenditure, government can give me a rebate of 3% of it. If I'm doing 20%, maybe 5%. If I'm doing expenditure of 40% of my salary, government can give me 7% of rebate. Now, what will happen? This will increase the expenditure in the everyday consumption market, which will increase the production, which will increase the demand, which will increase the production, which will.
I have a better suggestion.
Well, it's an interesting suggestion. Mr. Agarwal, do you want to respond to Dharmendra's suggestion?
I tell you, if you have only aim of increasing consumption through more liquid money in the people, just print money and distribute. That will save you all the trouble.
I
so
don't
you
think
don't
technically
do
how
like
that's
this.
how.
Economy, you have to look into multiple factors. So there are certain suggestions, there are certain solutions, but there are certain challenges and there are certain constraints. We have to build onto this, and every decision has a particular aspect to be tackled in the economic challenges. So this today's announcement was creating an atmosphere of level playing platform for supporting Make in India and supporting manufacturing and give competitive edge to India across globe. That's the only aspect that we should look into, and this is one of the very important and big bang reform that has taken place. This will definitely help. There can be more steps. Yes. There will be more steps.
Okay, Mr. Agarwal, I just want to take one question with Professor Kumar, please, if I may. Professor Kumar, the point that was made by the other professor of economics who called us a little while ago, who said this would mean the government would have to sit out effectively one capex cycle because it's handing this over to the private sector. And like was pointed out earlier, there's no guarantee that the private sector is going to invest unless they see some sort of change of sentiment or change of consumer demand on the ground. They might just hold it in reserves or hand it over to their shareholders. Professor Kumar.
So then we can again increase.
Yeah, so absolutely right. You know, there's no guarantee that if the companies earn more, that they will be spending more either on giving to the employees or to the, investment cycle. So in that sense, the private investment is not certain when you give a tax cut. It's the demand which is important. And that's where the argument is right, that if the government was to spend more, that would then lead to a crowding in of investment in the economy. That would lead to private sector investing more as they see demand rising in the economy. So I think what the other Mr. Kumar was saying is exactly what I've been arguing, that what we need is an increase in investment by the government in the economy, which will then bring in more demand and more this thing. And that's where your question about employment, that's very important, because the organized sector only employs 6% of the workforce. 94% is in the unorganized sector. And when you give to the corporate sector, it will only lead to a direct increase in the employment in the organized sector, if at all there is some. But what about the 94% where the bulk of the unemployment is taking place? That is where you need to increase expenditures. And given the shortage of resources in the budget, if you give so much to the organized sector, then how will you give to the unorganized sector without the fiscal deficit rising by another couple of percentage points? So therefore, if there's a choice to be made, first choice should be that you invest in the unorganized sector and then in the organized sector.
Actually, Mr. Agarwal spooked me a little bit, because I said, what if the corporates don't invest the money? He said, then we'll increase the tax again. So it's that sort of talk, Mr. Agarwal, that makes corporate India so nervous. But Mr. Vinkesh Gulati, this is unlikely to...
One point.
Oh, you'll have to be very quick.
Just one question to Mr. Kumar. I want to, I just want to ask that if the everybody says that government investment is the solution to all the problems, then what about the crowding of effect with the government investment, which acts negatively to the private investment? What does he want to say on that? So there is a crowding out effect of the government investment also. So negative connotation is there, positive connotation.
No, but we can only crowd out when the private investment is present in the market, Mr. Agarwal. Right now, private investment has run for the hills. This is not an ordinary situation.
There is a competition of investment.
There is no investment at all. There's nobody to crowd. The investment field is empty.
Not only that, Faye, I would argue that
Yes, Professor Kumar.
Faye, I would argue that the peak of the investment was in 2012-13 at 37%. That's come down to 30%. So there's really no shortage of investment resources. If the economy does well, then both the public sector and the private sector both can be investing more, and we can reach 37%.
Yes. All right. Let me just bring in Mr. Gulati. One second, gentlemen. No, 1 second, Mr. Agarwal. I just want to bring in Mr. Gulati. Mr. Gulati, since this tax cut, 1 second, is only going to be applicable 1st April onwards, it's unlikely that you will see any sort of impact right now in this festive season. The festive season that I know there are a lot of people in your industry, retailers, traders, not just of cars, but of other goods, were banking on. So when you go back to your association and your office tomorrow, what are you going to tell them? What is the mood going to be like?
So Faye, actually, I feel I'm a misfit in this panel. So all economic questions and all economic discussion. So, my overall, obviously, this is a long run thing, what I told you before.
Yes.
But one point for everybody, if the demand is low, we are seeing a regular 10-12 months degrowth happening. If the demand is low, the consumption is not there, the auto industry, which is around 50% of the manufacturing GDP, if it doesn't grow, where the earning would be there, where will you say that you will save in the taxes? So there will be no saving. If a company which has earned maybe 1,000 crore last year, because of the low demand, low sale, it will be already earning only 600 this year or 500. So even if the tax is reduced from 30 odd percentage to 20, there will be no such benefit or no such saving to at least invest. Now the second part of the question, obviously we were expecting a lot today from the GST Council. There were a lot of confidence there because the demand is too low. I don't know, from tomorrow, the point is I'll have to be motivated and I have to motivate all our members and the team and our employees that still we have to survive in this market and festive season is on. We'll have to put the best foot forward and see whatever we can cash on. If you see the last 3 festive points, the Onam, the Ganpati, the Vishkarma Puja in Bihar, all 3 is tanked out actually. So there is no major growth there.
Yes.
The Navratri is around. I don't see a lot of things happening. But obviously, we have to be in the market. We'll work a lot and see what best we can do from our association or the dealers.
Yes. And I don't see you as a misfit, Mr. Gulati. You're actually the voice from the ground who has to make a business work, which is why it's important. We also have Mr. Murthy on the phone line from Bangalore. Mr. Murthy, namaskara. Go ahead.
Yeah, please.
Mr. Murthy? All right, we seem to have lost Mr. Murthy. We'll try and get him back in a bit. But we've run out of time on this discussion. It's an extremely interesting discussion. While the stock market has reacted very positively to the government's decision to slash corporate tax by nearly 10%, the stock market's given it a 2 thumbs up. But then again, the stock market is sentiment and is not exactly what's going on the ground. Mr. Gulati, who runs a car dealership, said that this means that the impact will not be felt immediately, at least not in the short term, not for the festive season. So it is going to be perhaps a tough festive season. The second point is the money that goes to corporate India right now should ideally, one is hoping that they will spend it investing, creating jobs, creating infrastructure and boosting the economy. If they don't, if they keep it in reserve or give it to their shareholders, then it might not work out as well as we want to. But like has been pointed out, this could make India far more competitive on the global scale for manufacturers who are looking to set up manufacturing firms. At a tax rate of only 15%, we become competitive when compared to China and other Asian countries. We'll keep a close eye on it. Fingers crossed that things improve quickly, because for every single last Indian, the economy, whether we understand it or not, affects the way we live, the way we run our houses, and how much food we have to put on the table.